Tuesday night, so we have some questions to answer. First question. Dear Luang Por, can you practice mindfulness at any time? Yes. Simple answer, yes. Mindfulness, I assume that means sati. The word sati is usually nowadays translated as mindfulness. But another way of translating it is recollection. So bringing to mind or keeping in mind something. And that's one thing to understand. Your mind always mindful of something. You are knowing or mindful of something. But because you have a mind with you all the time, then you can practice mindfulness at any time because you can be mindful of something. Except for perhaps when you're in deep sleep, when you don't know anything. But up until the moment you fall asleep or from the moment you wake up, you can practice mindfulness. And it's something the Buddha encouraged us to do, to practice mindfulness. And he gave many encouragements to practice mindfulness, and he said mindfulness is a quality that's always valuable, useful to us, always helpful. But he taught what we call samma sati, so right mindfulness or correct mindfulness. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the Buddha's method or way for getting beyond suffering, leading us to the end of suffering. Samma sati is one of those 8 factors. So it's only one factor in 8. And to be practiced correctly, it's practiced together with the other 8 factors. So that's something to bear in mind. So, for example, the Buddha taught the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the sutta on greater mindfulness, describing different methods, techniques for cultivating mindfulness, and different objects to put mindfulness on. So, body, feelings, mind objects, and then he further detailed the way to practice mindfulness with these different objects. But another thing he mentioned is that mindfulness has to be purified by sila. And without sila, then mindfulness won't be effective for cutting off mental defilements which cause us suffering. So part of the Eightfold Path involves the practice of sila. So we have Samma Gammanta, Samma Vaca, Samma Achiva, right livelihood, which involves sila, the way you earn your living, has to be done in a way that doesn't deliberately, intentionally exploit or harm others. Right action involves undertaking to not kill, not steal, not commit acts of sexual misconduct, not to take intoxicants, and then right speech, to undertake not to lie, or speak malicious speech, abusive speech, harsh speech. So mindfulness is purified by sila, so those 3 factors of the path are supporting samma sati. And then also you need right view, samma ditti, and then right thought, samma sankappa. They also go together with samma sati and right effort, samma vayama. All the factors of the path work together to purify mindfulness, to support it and make sure it's directed to the proper purpose of mindfulness, which is to help us to pay attention to our body, speech and mind for cultivating the path, recognizing mental defilements and abandoning them. So practicing right mindfulness at any time, and often we're beginning our training in right mindfulness in simply being mindful of what we're saying and what we're doing, so that we can practice precepts, train ourselves with precepts and mindfulness of our basic conduct and actions in daily life, to avoid acting in ways that are promoting and encouraging the mental defilements. So not acting in ways that harm ourselves and others. And then practicing right effort, Samma Vayama, supports right mindfulness, because it's giving you also the task for cultivating right mindfulness in different situations through your day. So recognizing whether you have an unskillful or unwholesome mental state that is a cause of suffering and needs to be abandoned, or preventing unwholesome mental states arising. You need mindfulness because you need to be paying attention to your situation. The modern word is situational awareness as you interact with other people, yourself, the world, different things. Maybe you're in a situation where you're about to trigger some unwholesome thinking or speech or action, and mindfulness can come up and cut that off already in conjunction with right effort. And so on. And the different factors of the path work together. And we need right understanding so that we understand better what is wholesome and unwholesome in our behavior. That motivates us to keep precepts, train ourselves to abandon greed, anger and delusion from our mind. So right view and right understanding supports right mindfulness. Mindfulness itself is just a quality that anyone's mind can have, but whether it's right mindfulness or not will depend on whether the other factors are present and supporting it. So Ajahn Chah used to say you can be mindful of, or a cat can be mindful chasing a mouse, but its intention is unwholesome because it's just thinking about killing and eating that mouse. And it looks very intense when it's stalking a mouse, its eyes are fixed on the mouse, it's poised, it's ready to spring. So it seems very mindful, concentrated, but of course its mind is full of greed and anger. It's not in a wholesome state. So mindfulness can become what we call wrong mindfulness, miccha sati, when you're employing it to recollect unwholesome things for unwholesome ends. So, nowadays, they like to say, if you're training in shooting, you should be practicing mindfulness so that you can steady your mind and steady your heart rate and then concentrate on your target. And if you say you are shooting to kill a living being, then there would be some unwholesome karma in your mind because you would have to ignore that living being's aspiration for life. So there'd have to be some delusion and maybe some aversion there. So you're using mindfulness but not for a wholesome way, so it's not mindfulness as part of the Buddhist path for ending suffering. It's maybe just to get a job done or do something for a more unwholesome purpose. Or you could be a getaway driver for a robbery and then you drive very mindfully this car to get away from having committed a crime. You might have mindfulness, but it's not right mindfulness, and so on. So mindfulness is practiced at any time, but in conjunction with the other factors of the path. And we may be mindful of our speech, our actions, or particularly when mindfulness is more refined and we've got more time and space in our day to be more paying attention just to what we're thinking, then we direct mindfulness to know our thoughts, whether they're wholesome or unwholesome, to be cultivated, to be abandoned, and you can do that any time. So one of the best ways to develop strong mindfulness is practice meditation when you have the time. And in that moment, maybe you're sitting still or you're walking back and forth and you have no other activities to be involved with, so you can really train your mindfulness in a very intense, continuous way, using maybe just one object. So when you're sitting meditation, you might practice mindfulness of breathing, in and out breathing. And you don't need to look at or get involved with other things at that time. You can put all your attention on practicing mindfulness of breathing. And one quality that supports mindfulness is called sampajanya, means clear comprehension or clear awareness of what you're doing and why, the purpose of it, and to be aware from moment to moment of the quality of your effort and what's going on, so that you can achieve your outcome, your goal. So if you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, clear comprehension is also knowing whether the breath is going in, the breath is out, it's long, it's short, it's coarse, it's refined, and may also help guide you with different experiences that come up as you're watching the breath. Thoughts arise. Clear comprehension knows this thought is not helpful, it's obstructive to the practice of mindfulness of breathing, something to be discarded, let go of, and so on. So sati is practiced together with sampajanya in all postures, in all activities. But it's practiced most intensely when you're meditating in the formal way. But of course, you finish your meditation, you go off, you can practice mindfulness as you do other activities. Eating, walking, sitting, lying down, working, typing, any kind of activity, driving a car, walking along the road, shopping, mindful shopping. And you'll realize that, sila supports mindfulness, because in certain situations it's hard to be mindful because your sila is not strong, or you're receiving a lot of sense impressions, so then it's hard to be mindful in the present moment. So you have to be aware of the activities you're involved with and how conducive they are to the path, or how they obstruct the cultivation of the Noble Eightfold Path as well. So the short answer is yes, you can practice mindfulness at all times, but it's also a skill that you're learning how to do it well and what factors support it over time. Another question. Ajahn, it's important to bow with meaning. Whenever I bow at home to the Buddha image in the morning before meditation or after meditation, before leaving home and upon coming back to home, when asking for forgiveness and before retiring for the day, I will recite Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati and Sanghanusati with understanding. When I bow to monks, I reflect they are the well-practiced disciples of the Buddha. When I bow down to my parents in the past, I reflect the meaning of the first bow with gratitude, second bow with respect, third bow with metta. Lumpur, when I bow to monks, I reflect they are the Buddha's well-practiced disciples, practicing directly, insightfully and with integrity. Because of the condition of time constraint, kindly advise if there is another way of doing it. Well, you seem to have a good understanding of why you bow and how to use it as part of your daily practice. It's in different traditions, the actual physical act of bowing is done slightly different. It's something that's culturally conditioned or culturally accepted norms for the way you bow. Or some people just use hands in Anjali, some people prostrate fully on the ground, some people bow, like in our tradition we just kneel and bow 3 times to a Buddha or a teacher. So there's the physical part, which is slowing you down, making you mindful of your posture, pausing so that you reflect in a wholesome way on various qualities such as Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha and what they stand for. And Ajahn Chah used to say you're also recollecting those same qualities that you're bowing to when you see a Buddha statue or Sangha. You're also aspiring to bring up those same qualities in your own heart. So it's as if you're bowing to those qualities or the potential for those qualities in your heart. As far as, when you bow, it's a fairly brief action. So it's not a moment that you have to explain all the meanings of, say, the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. There may be some particular reflection that helps you at that moment to be mindful and bring up a sense of reverence, respect. But it's a fairly brief action. One reason we do morning and evening puja or chanting is to expand on the meaning of bowing, you might say. So during the chanting we bow to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and then we're reciting in Pali or English or both the verses recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. We're chanting in praise of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Verses that are bringing up skillful reflections. So that's where you're maybe training in wise reflection on the qualities of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And then in meditation too, you may meditate on the qualities of Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha, and you can do meditation in a discursive way where you're mindfully recollecting the different qualities of Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha, thinking them through, reminding yourself what they are and what they mean to you. So this is verbalizations in your mind, ideas, concepts that you're bringing up, but in a mindful way as a discursive meditation. And that can be quite useful sometimes to remind ourselves who the Buddha is, who the Dhamma, what the Dhamma is, who are the Sangha, what are the qualities of the Sangha. And as you progress in those kind of practices and recollections, you're actually going to a more impersonal sense of the Buddha rather than the historical Buddha. You're more seeing the qualities that the Buddha embodied and then aspiring to develop them in yourself. And the same with the Sangha. Although we may know Sangha, monks and nuns, and we know and respect them and follow them, their teachings, that's fine. But the Sangha are still individual human beings. We don't know how advanced or not advanced they are in their practice. When you're bowing to Sangha, you're particularly bowing to the qualities that make for the enlightened Sangha, the Arya Sangha. So we say practicing well, practicing directly, practicing with integrity, practicing with insight. The Arya Sangha, the noble ones, come from those beings, men and women who have practiced cultivating this Noble Eightfold Path till those qualities arise in their heart and change their mind and the conditioning process of the mind, so they're abandoning unwholesome dhammas rooted in greed, anger, delusion, cultivating wholesome dhammas rooted in non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion, or the path, and then realize the fruit. So we recollect the qualities of Sangha, which are impersonal. They're not, you don't have to associate them with a particular person, although somebody may embody them, but it's these qualities we're aspiring to in ourselves, and we're recognizing them in others. And when practiced well, they give rise to what we call Magga, Phala, and eventually Nibbana. So Magga is path, Phala is fruit, Nibbana, enlightenment or awakening. And you have the four pairs of beings, as we just chanted this evening. You have one who's practicing Sodapati Magga, the path, Sodapati Pala, experiencing the fruit of, we say, stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment. Sakatakami Magga and Pala, once returner, the fruits of that. Anagami Magga Pala, non-returner. Then Arahata Magga Pala, the Arahant. So these are called four pairs of beings. So the four pairs of beings may be just one person going through these stages, or different individuals at different points in their practice. So you meet them, or you aspire to follow these enlightened beings, and we hear about stories of them and hear about their practice, and we may believe somebody to have attained one or more of these levels of Maggapala, but still you're aspiring to those qualities. Your own aspiration is to develop them for yourself as well. And you might never really know another being what level of enlightenment they've achieved in their practice. So don't forget, there's that impersonal sense, in the sense you're cultivating these qualities in your mind. It's an interesting reflection. The mental defilements rooted in greed, anger and delusion are impersonal. The Dhamma is impersonal because they're all not self. So, although we still talk about a person practicing, abandoning defilement, but sometimes following defilement, sometimes abandoning defilement, eventually attaining Maggapala. We talk about people with names and they have their life story and so on, and that's useful in the conventional sense. But on the higher sense, there's no person. The defilements have no owner, they're not a person. The Noble Eightfold Path has no owner, it's not a person. These are conditioning factors for the mind that when developed, when kilesas are seen and abandoned, the path is developed, can bring an individual to enlightenment, to the end of suffering. Another question: is there ever a right time to think about things in meditation? Well, there's thinking and there's thinking, isn't there? As we've discussed earlier, probably our number one priority in meditation is to establish and maintain or sustain mindfulness and clear comprehension. And to do that, one needs effort, energy. So you have this phrase from the suttas and from these different chants and reflections: Atapi sampajano satima, mindful, fully aware, and ardent or energetic. These are the kind of priority qualities that you're cultivating in meditation and indeed in all activities through your day. But of course, in life we need to think sometimes. We need to think about how to practice Dhamma, and we receive teachings, like right now. You hear teachings, remember them, process them, think about them, and that's fine. There's a time and a place for that. You go to work, you need to think about the jobs that you have to do, how to complete them, what you need to do. You run your life, you have to pay bills, you have to earn money, you have to eat food, you have to go here, go there. We use thought. So thought in itself is, again, it's a useful tool of the mind. It's a function of the human mind, and we are brought up, trained to think through education and language, so we can think. But then thought is one part of the human person. We have body, we have feelings, we have memory, we have thought, we have sense consciousness. So thought can be used for good purpose, or it can be a servant of the mental defilements. It can get hijacked by greed, anger and delusion and lead us to stress and suffering, and lead us to even express that and harm other people as well as ourselves. Or we can harness thought for the practice. So even in meditation, there's a role for thinking things through, understanding things, using what we call reasoned reflection, yoniso-manasikara, wise attention, giving wise attention to food, for example. You eat food with wise attention, you pay attention to what you're doing, and then you use some wise reflection, the thinking aspect of the mind, to understand how much to eat, what is the purpose of the food, the nature of food, what is healthy food and not healthy food, and so on. You can do activities and you use reasoned reflection and the power of thought to get that job done, and even as part of the practice you can use thought to counter the tendency to just eat with greed or confusion. Or in a situation you use thought how to solve a problem by using guidelines of the Buddha's path, or keeping precepts, using mindfulness and wisdom to understand things. You can think things through, and occasionally even in meditation you'll be doing that to understand a problem. So maybe you have a particular mental hindrance bothering you as you meditate, and you can't be yet very mindful of your object because this problem is bothering you. So sometimes you need to think it through. What is the problem? Is there any way I can look at this to help my mind let it go, so I can return to practicing mindfulness of breathing sometimes? So that may mean you use thought to understand that there's a problem. Maybe you're angry, or you're afraid, or worried, or you're sleepy. And you use some wise reflection to see where you can turn your attention to something else, away from the hindrance, the object that is obstructing your practice of mindfulness. You may turn to bring up the thought of metta, goodwill, when you're angry, or find an object that arouses energy to get you through your sleepiness, and so on. So wise reflection helps us in meditation. But that's different from just thinking randomly or aimlessly, or your mind wandering around thinking many thoughts that have to no real purpose. Those are the kind of thoughts that are not helpful and to be abandoned. So when there's a purpose and a use and we're mindful, we can think. If it supports the arising of wholesome dhammas in our practice. And then other times it's correct just to let go of thought. And of course, if you are attaining samadhi or one-pointedness, at that time you'll be abandoning all thought and just being mindful of one object, such as the breath. Last question. Luang Por, why do monks look at skeletons? If you look at skeletons a lot, you might get to like skeletons, and that's why you look at them. You enjoy it. It makes your mind peaceful. But like many things, it's an acquired taste. You need to practice. And at first, most people, monks or anyone else, probably don't like looking at skeletons. Why would you? Most people feel they're ugly, scary, remind you of death. So when do you see skeletons? Well, it's in horror movies, or Halloween, people wear skeleton costumes. I once went to a Halloween party before I was a monk, and I went with one guy who was wearing the skeleton costume. So he's all in black with a white skeleton painted on him, and he ran down the road trying to scare people. He wasn't very good at it though, so no one got scared. So skeletons are associated with death, fear, ugliness, ghosts, etc. That's the more normal, common perception of skeletons, isn't it? But actually, the Buddha said we can use skeleton as one part of the body. So the body that the Buddha divided into 31 or 32 parts, which we run through in the meditations, in the chanting, and the bones are one part of that. And the Buddha said you can take something as ordinary as bones, skeleton, and contemplate them to develop both mindfulness, samadhi, and then insight, wisdom. And just like the breath is very universal, everyone breathes, everyone has a skeleton. So you look at someone, there's actually bones there, aren't there? It's just we choose not to be aware of them. They're covered in skin, so we tend to just look at somebody on the outside, their skin, their hair, how they look, are they attractive, not attractive, etc., how they dress. The normal person is not looking at the bones in another person or themselves. But of course you can take this up as an object of mindfulness in your meditation, and people do, and they're just focusing on bones alone as their main meditation object. They might visualize different bones in the body, become familiar with the visual image, and they may pick just one bone. So it could be the chest, the rib cage, or the skull, or a leg bone, or something. And they focus on the bones to bring out strong mindfulness, and then also to develop the perception of the unattractiveness of the body, because bones are not very attractive. And then they're focusing and seeing bones a lot more than usual. So they see them in themselves, they notice them, they feel them, the sensation from the inside of bones, the hardness of them. And they even notice bones in other people rather than looking at someone just for the beauty. They have bones there as well. They have a skull, they have leg bones, hip bones, rib cage, and so on. Everyone has bones. And so you get these stories of practitioners, usually monks and nuns, but not always. And sometimes people come on meditation retreats and they focus on the bones and they get an image of bones, and it becomes very clear for a while, or maybe they develop it constantly. And then sometimes they even have the experience, they look at someone and they're only seeing bones. So the sense of it being a man or a woman or someone they know, someone they don't know, disappears. They're just seeing the bones, or one of the bones, or the whole set of bones. And then you get like the story of the monk focusing on the bones, walking along in the time of the Buddha, and then the man is chasing his wife. I think he had an argument with his wife or something, and she's running away from home. The man comes looking for her, and he asked the monk, who had seen the woman go by, but he only saw a set of bones. So he asked, "Did you see my wife? See that woman coming by?" And he just said, "No, I only saw a skeleton." So sometimes monks, they focus so much on bones, that's all they notice. When they look at someone, they're only noticing the bones, not other factors, other aspects of their body. And this isn't weird or crazy, it's simply they're training their mind to notice one thing, one perception. And that can be quite helpful for letting go of everything else, and also seeing the unattractiveness of the body and the the repulsiveness of the body and the impermanence of the body. Because when we die, the bones often are what's left at the end after a body decomposes. The bones are what left. And then they get buried or whatever, and people dig them up 500 years later and find bones and have to deal with that. So when we were doing our last building project, we were warned not to find bones, because nowadays if you find bones, the government come in and close your building site down, and they have to investigate who the bones are, who they belong to. Luckily we didn't find any bones. But in our monastery we quite often do find bones, because a lot of animals live here. So we find a lot of animal bones around the monastery. And they teach us, don't they? They teach us this was once a furry kangaroo or a deer or wombat, and now it's just a set of bones. And those bones eventually break up and go into the earth. They're part of the earth element. So this can be a whole meditation in itself. So sometimes monasteries have skeletons hanging up so that monks can study, just like a doctor studies anatomy, the monks study the bone structure. Sometimes we go to see autopsies. They cut up a cadaver, a corpse for us, or we observe maybe when medical students are getting instruction and they allow us to have a look and understand more about the human body, see its unattractive side, see what it's made up of, see what it looks like on the inside. So it's not a very popular meditation, but it's a very valuable one and can bring the practitioner all the way to Nibbana. And, I've met monks who practice contemplating bones or other parts of the body, and they've attained jhana, samadhi, and insight, Maggaphala, Nibbana. It's possible. So don't dismiss the bones too quickly, even though they're not a very popular meditation. I remember one time we had a nun come to stay with Ajahn Kalyano, and she was interested to study and meditate on the bones, but she found them difficult to contemplate bones, visualize them, think about them. So he encouraged her to create, first of all, very beautiful white bones. Make your bones very beautiful, then it's more attractive to the mind to focus the mind, the mental attention on bones when they're very beautiful white bones. Then later to watch those bones, mentally dissolve them so they become darker, powdery, cracked, broken, separated, and then disappear. So there's even some nuances here in the way you contemplate bones. So we'll finish the Q&A session there tonight with bones.